Hello, welcome everyone. We've got quite the crowd. I'm excited, glad to have you with us. While we're waiting for folks to trickle in, just wanted to give you a quick heads up. At this panel, we are giving away a spot to our medical school application boot camp that will kick off in March. So if you're interested in attending, would definitely encourage you to enter that giveaway. You can do that with this bit.ly link here. You can also scan this QR code to get more details about the boot camp, but take a couple seconds to enter, take a screenshot of this slide if you'd like. But excited to give away a seat. Awesome. Let's go ahead and move right along so we can get to the main event of the hour. You're here because you are thinking about med school applications. Exciting. We are glad to have you here, glad to be kicking off med school week here at Leland. If you're interested to sign up for Leland and get access to recordings and other resources, go ahead and take a picture of that QR code or scan it right now, take a screenshot, and I'll go ahead and give you a quick overview of what's to come today, as well as our following sessions. Like I said, we are in Med School Week 2025. We're going to be covering all things med school application. We'll be talking about school selection, admissions, letters of recommendation, all parts of the application, and giving you some free resources to help you along. We're here on Tuesday, so we're covering just an overview of medical school applications. Wednesday and Thursday, we'll be covering some other topics like gaining a competitive advantage, talking through the MCAT, and other parts of the application, some office hours as well. In terms of event logistics for today, feel free to ask questions in the chat. Please be respectful and supportive to other folks on the call, and make sure that you've RSVP'd for each session that you're interested in. If there's sessions tomorrow, the day after that you're interested in, make sure that you've RSVP'd for those, and make sure that you've signed up for Leland Plus to get access to the event recordings and any other resources we share during this week. We'll go through some welcome and introductions today so you can get to know our panelists and Leland. Then we'll move on to the panel and do a little final word and wrap up. It'll be a info-packed, insight-heavy hour, so we're excited to have you with us. To get you familiar with some of the Leland team, hi, my name's Ellie. I run courses and content at Leland, so if you are interested in that med school application boot camp, you'll be getting emails from me. I'm excited to work with you on those boot camps. We've got a great plan there. We also have Erica and Amanda on the call. You'll probably see them in the background. They make all of these fun events happen. They make sure that we are set up with some of our best and brightest coaches on the Leland platform. So super grateful to them for getting this set up. And we have some incredible panelists. We've got Krysta, Christopher, and Jordan with us, and I'll give them a couple of seconds to quickly introduce themselves before we dive in. Krysta, I'll start with you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ellie. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Krysta. I use she, her pronouns. Really excited to be here with you this evening. I've been in the med school coaching space for the last 5 years. My full-time day job is that I actually work at a large university here in the Midwest in a residential sciences college, working with folks who are applying to med school, grad school. So have lots of familiarity with that application process and really how to help folks to tell their story in a meaningful way. I've been on Leland since September of this past year. And so it's been really amazing to get to know other coaches here on the platform like Jordan and Chris, and to get to connect with applicants from all over the world. So I'm excited to be here with you this evening.
Awesome. Thank you, Krysta. Christopher.
Yeah, awesome, Krista. It's so good to get to know and see that wonderful colleagues are doing such wonderful work. So I am Chris. I'm a fourth year MD PhD student at Stanford. So right now I'm in my second year, a lot of flexibility doing the research and the PhD. But yeah, my journey to medicine was a kind of all around about very non-traditional, had a really hard time with school initially. Had a really good mentor, people that coached me back into a straight path towards medical school. Got to college, got involved with a lot of research, really utilized my pre-health advisors, and then now I'm here at Stanford, and I've been really looking forward to give all of what I've learned and been coached into backward to all of you. And so I'm looking forward to kind of giving a little bit of that today, but also hopefully working with any of you in the future.
Thanks, Chris. And we'll finish up with you, Jordan.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Jordan. I think, to give you an idea of who I am, I think it's best to say that my overarching interest in medicine and healthcare in general is just to make healthcare more preventative. I'm very, passionate about preventative care, longevity, good quality primary care and how to improve it in the future. I think that there's a lot. So that's a playground that I'm interested in playing in for the rest of my life. So I have kind of like Chris, I have a very kind of non-traditional background. I did an engineering undergrad degree. I actually spent a couple years at the patent office prior to going into medical school. I went to med school at the Carle, Illinois College of Medicine, which is kind of an engineering-based medical school, which was very appealing to me. And so I think, I'll have a lot to say about finding the med school that fits you just right because I felt like that school was like absolutely mine. And I actually spent 1 year getting an MBA at Kellogg. So that kind of how I got linked into the whole Leland thing was there was a lot of, buzz around the MBA. And I'm really interested in how Leland kind of can become a more medical school focused platform as well too. So yeah, just have a very, diverse background. I have a lot of different experiences that I feel like I can share and hopefully I can help you today and maybe in the future with, your med school aspirations and dreams. But I'm just grateful to be here. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordan. And thank you, Krysta and Chris, too. Super excited to have you with us for this hour. We are in for a treat. Really quick, want to get to know you in the chat. Would love to have you drop kind of what you're studying and working on right now and what your dream med program would be. Go ahead and drop those in the chat. Would love to get to know the folks in our audience a little bit better. Let's see, there we go. Nice, we've got some other non-trad folks. Engineering, lots of folks working on the MCAT. The MCAT is a beast. Yes. Awesome. Got some pre-med math teacher making the pivot. I love it. Awesome. We've got quite the group here. Super excited to have you with us. Thanks so much. Alrighty. Wanted to quickly give you an intro to Leland if this is your first time with us. Super excited to have you with us, but Leland is your one-stop shop to help you break into the most competitive career paths and schools in the world. We do this through a few different offerings. We do this through one-on-one coaching with our expert coaches on our platform. We do this through live cohort-based courses like the bootcamp, Med School Application Bootcamp, as well as on-demand content through our Leland Plus library. So be sure to check out all three of those and see if one of those resources is a great fit for you. Often it's a combination of all three or a few of them. Super excited to have you here. Feel free to check those out. And Leland is working. We are helping folks accomplish their dreams and make those jumps into different areas that they're excited about, land their dream jobs, get into the most elite schools, and access those career opportunities that they're dreaming of. And we'd love to do that for you. And hopefully this free event can be kind of a springboard into the rest of that trajectory. From essays strategy to interviews, Leland will be able to help you navigate and manage the entire medical school application process. Our coaches are prepared to help you with all parts of the application. They can help you with your essays. They can help you with your personal statements, and they can get you prepared for the interview. We also have plenty of MCAT tutors who can help you crush that and get a great score. And if you're interested in booking a free strategy call, you can use that QR code down there to meet with our client support team and our customer support team and success team to get matched with a perfect coach for you. Alrighty, now let's dive into the panel. You're here because you're interested in going to med school, and I'm sure you're wondering, how do I create a top-tier candidacy? How do I make sure that I can get into the schools that I am dreaming of? We have some high-level advice here. You want to start your prep early. You want to have a high MCAT score. You also want to know about the programs you're applying to and be prepared with some great letters of recommendation on top of the other components of your application. And we'll be sure to touch on all of these topics during today's session with our panelists and get some great insights on how to be best prepared for your application. I want to hear from you first before we dive in and hear from our panelists. I want to know what part of the application process seems the most daunting right now. And it's okay if it's all of it. We can also, if there's a specific thing that you're worried about Would love to know kind of what's on your mind, what you're trying to get out of this. Okay, a lot of MCAT, valid. Personal statements. Yeah, I think a lot of concern about how do I communicate my story, my experiences in a way that's compelling and clear. Interviews, recommendation letters. Yeah, for sure. Perfect. Well, I have full confidence in our panelists here to shed some insight on all parts of the application. A lot of these things that you are all mentioning. I'm super excited to get you some insights on these. I'm glad that you're here. Let's dive in. We've got our first question to kick things off. What is one of your top tips for someone applying to medical school? Krysta, I'd love to start with you, and then we'll kick it over to Jordan and then Chris.
Yeah, that sounds great. So the number one thing I always tell folks in our very first coaching session is that I want you to stay off of Reddit. And I know that that might be sort of a hot take, but I think that there are a lot of folks who go to Reddit in the very beginning of their application cycle to learn about timelines, to get basic information about what they might need to be doing as they're working on their application. But what I see every single cycle is that the applicants I'm working with get so frustrated and so beat down by comment boards and threads on Reddit, where they're hearing from folks who are, telling them like, oh, you only got a 5.10 on your MCAT, you're never getting into medical school, right? Or, oh, you took more than one gap year, you're never getting into medical school. Or folks who will say, I heard that this program stopped interviews in November, when in fact they're still doing that through March. So I want to encourage you to stay off of Reddit, find sources and people that you trust, like a coach, a mentor, and try to remember that you're running your own race. You're not competing with anybody else as much as it might feel like it. Each year I try to attend a couple of the white coat ceremonies that my students go on to participate in as they're starting med school. And something that's always really stuck with me is that the director of admissions at Oakland University talked about how they didn't compare the applicants to one another. They looked at the pre-med competencies from the AAMC and really tried to understand how the applicants met those competencies and not how they stacked up against one another. So stay off of Reddit and run your own race.
Awesome. Thanks, Krysta. Jordan.
Thanks, Krista. I think that's a great. Yeah, Reddit is a rabbit hole that will definitely you could go down that one pretty far. This is going to sound a little weird, but I honestly well, not super weird, but I would say, it would be interesting for someone that's applying for medical school to go to YouTube and look up videos of creators who have said that they're leaving medicine. And I know that sounds a little weird, but I think it actually gives you kind of some insight into people that have gone down this path and have now chosen not to do it, and gives you some insight into what your life may be like. There may be lots of things that you find that you don't like about medicine, or maybe there'll be things that you find that you do like about it. And I just think that if you can really drill down on why medicine, why medical school, and also be somewhat well versed in why some people actually choose not to do it, and why some people choose to do it. There's lots of people that just say, oh yeah, I just couldn't handle blood and guts, so there's no way I could do that, or I'm not smart enough. And obviously, because you're here, you're smart enough and interested enough to do it. I just think a really strong reason for why you want it and why you're serious about it is something that will shine through in an application. And I think that the more you can understand all perspectives of people that absolutely do love medicine and can't see their life without it, but also some that have gone down this path and have actually realized that it's not really for them. I think that can really shine through and help you craft the right personal statement, make sure that your personality shows through in the interview, make sure that you can convince a committee that you're super serious about this and that you really want it. So that's something I would say.
Perfect. Thanks, Jordan. And we'll wrap up on this question with you, Chris.
Yeah. Jordan's got the right lens to this, and Krista have all understanding. Look, honestly, capitalize on something unique about you. And I know this is super cliche and everybody says it, but I really mean find the common thread that unites your entire application together. It's not really so much about uniqueness. I need to be this crazy, amazing person going overseas and doing incredible stuff. And you can totally do that. But more so matters that you have authenticity deeply embedded into your story. And I know we'll talk about when I keep saying story, narrative, theme, like those are all very big, high flying words. And so it's kind of getting annoying, when you're thinking about the medical school application, but really capitalize on something of say, I've got something, and all of you do, all 300 or so of you do have something to bring to medicine. Capitalize on that and start tying those experiences together. That's what I did. When I work with clients, I help them discover their unique sort of through line in their experiences and shape it into a compelling narrative that really resonates not only with the admissions committees, but also how you want to leave medicine later on, like Jordan was saying. So that's my take on this, high level, but we'll get into more specifics as the panel goes on.
Yeah, that's great. I think I'm hearing like a very common theme across all of these, which is know yourself, know what's motivating you, know your why, and then trust yourself to be able to translate that and be authentic and having that come through in your application. That's great. All right, our next question, getting down into some nitty-gritties. What is the ideal timeline to prepare? Krysta, I'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to say that there is an ideal timeline in terms of hearing back from schools, kind of feeling like you're on track to get answers early. But I also want to remind folks that you can get into medical school without applying on an ideal timeline. And so what I mean by that is that I've worked with applicants who have started in May with their application going in right away. But I've also worked with folks who have really successfully navigated the application process and not turned their primary application in until September. Right. And they still got into multiple med schools. So ideally, what we're going to be thinking about is over the next 2 months, I really want you to be building your personal statement and your activity section and securing those letters of recommendation. In an ideal world, we have those pretty locked in by the beginning of May, so that by the time the application opens at the beginning of May, you're able to start submitting those materials as soon as possible. Again, keeping to sort of that ideal timeline. If we're able to get everything in before the end of the month of May, that would be great. You'll start to hear secondary decisions in July, and then interview season starts as early as August. But again, remember, everybody kind of runs their own race. I'm going to be offering a session tomorrow actually about navigating the med school application cycle, where we'll go a little bit more into depth. But again, I would say plan ahead, but don't get discouraged if your timeline gets a little delayed.
Awesome. Thanks, Krysta. Super encouraging to hear that even though we do see these like very strict deadlines, like it is not the end all be all of your med school application. You can
Absolutely.
flexibility.
The tentative timeline that I hear from med school admissions directors is, so technically you can apply through December of your application year, but realistically, if you're in by Labor Day, so that first weekend of September, that's going to give you your best window. So the earlier, the better, but it's not too late if you're still in July or August and want to.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Our next question. I think this is hitting home, I think, for a lot of our participants. What is the best way to prepare for the MCAT? Jordan, I'd love to hear from you on this one.
Yeah, great question. Obviously, in the chat, it seemed like everyone was stressed out about the MCAT, and deservedly so. It's a test, and I mean, that's saying it lightly. It's a test that will really be challenging. I actually took the MCAT twice. My first time, I believe I started in like December or January and thought that I was just going to do it all on my own, and it didn't really work out very well for me, And so the next time around, when it came, when I took it the next time around, I actually made a much better plan. I did reach out to a testing prep company. They haven't paid me or anything. I don't even know if they're really still around, but I use Altius Test Prep, and they were just, there was a one-on-one tutor. There was group sessions. There was, they really got me loaded, like launched into Anki. I thought for the longest time in undergrad that I just wasn't a flashcard person. I was doing an engineering degree, and flashcards are basically useless in engineering because you have to like think through the problem rather than just like memorize something, right? And it was so helpful to just see what other people were doing to actually, prepare and do well. I think that there's a balance. Krysta mentioned earlier, like Reddit really can be like can be a tough place, but it's also helpful to get some guidance and some, or at least some ideas on how to prepare and how to do better. And I think like for me, it was like there's a balance between not letting other people stress you out, but also getting ideas from other people on how to study the right way. And so, I got kind of loaded into Anki and started like finally realized kind of the power of flashcards, especially when just trying to memorize a bunch of information. And so, for me, I think obviously if you have the resources and if you can, like a test prep company with a tutor and somebody that's kind of like on you regularly is absolutely a great way to go. And there's probably more discounted ways of doing that, so that you can hopefully get, that help or maybe the accountability that you need from somebody else, but maybe on at least more of a budget. I just think it's important to have someone that's kind of keeping your feet to the fire and making sure that you're preparing the right way. So that's what I would say about that.
Gotcha. I think one of the key themes I was picking up there is just accountability and discipline are just keys for making sure you can get through and be prepared. Chris, I don't know if there were any other last thoughts you wanted to add here.
I can share a little bit. I think it's important to think about when any of my clients say, okay, when do I take the MCAT? I would say, when do you want to apply? That'll depend. Because really, like, I was someone that rushed taking the MCAT, and I want to hopefully steer you away from my mistakes. But I rushed taking the MCAT, and then I had to retake it and actually take an extra gap year because I just wasn't ready. What I should have done, if for practical sake, in this video here, try to think at least 1.5 years out to say, when am I going to apply, and then backtrack. Okay, when do I have enough buffering period for me to, if this happens and it's normal, people do retake it. Jordan took it twice. I took it twice. Give yourself some buffering period. So if you're going to apply that cycle, okay, I need to take it again, at least before that cycle. And so just give yourself some time and space between taking the MCAT and applying so that just in case you need to retake it. And then last thing, stick to few resources, quality and fewer resources than many resources. I was so overwhelmed. And I know a lot of clients that come in, I'm using this, I'm doing this, I'm doing Jack Weston and this, and just stick to a few things and do them really, really well. And you'll be able to excel on the MCAT.
So know your timeline, commit to that timeline, and simplify where you can so that you can just excel at what you do have, what resources you do have access to. That's great. All right, our next question. Is there an advantage to taking a gap year or completing a post-bac program? I know I have a few friends who took gap years or completed a post-bac program, but would love to hear from our panelists on this. I believe both Jordan and Chris have experience with gap years, and Krysta, I'm sure you've helped folks who have navigated this same situation. So Chris, would love to start with you on your perspective.
Yeah, I can definitely start. So as I mentioned earlier in my last response, I took 2 gap years. One, because I really wanted to make sure I was ready for the MD PhD program. It's a long program. And in general, I think anyone going into medical school, you got to really understand what you're getting into. And if it means taking a couple years off to think and reflect, that is completely okay. Then the other thing that I want to mention, the caveat to this, is that do it and utilize that time really well. Do not use this as a time to just rest and chill. Chill and do really good work. So the more time that you spend between graduating from college or whatever degree you may be taking and going into medical school, typically, most admissions committees expect more of you. And that just makes sense. The more time you spend doing things outside of school, the more opportunities, experiences you're going to have. So think about it, what your goal is. Okay, get to good GPA. Okay, maybe a post-bac is good. Maybe a master's program that helps increase and give you some credentials. And so think about your reason why, and then really take that year or 2 or 3 plus very seriously so that you can bounce forward into a good application.
Thanks, Chris. Jordan, Krysta, anything you wanted to want to add on there?
Yeah, I like what Chris said for sure. I think, I just want to give you an anecdote. I'm actually applying for residencies right now. I'm in my 4th year of med school and applying for residencies. And I was, interviewing with a program director at a residency, and I was talking about the experiences that I had between my undergrad and starting med school. And that was, like I said, earlier, I had worked at the patent office as a patent examiner, and I intend to use a lot of what I learned about the patent office, on how to obtain my own patents in the future and how to think innovatively and think creatively and things like that. And, I was just talking to him about that experience and what it meant for me. And he was like, I should say that he's starting a new program this year. So he's starting a new residency program where he's trying to find residents that can adapt well and quickly. And he said, I honestly think that, people like you that have had kind of life experience outside of medicine where they haven't just gone straight, oftentimes they actually, they adjust to residency a little bit better and they're able to pick up things a lot faster just because they've had more life experiences, And so that's not to say or, shame anyone who doesn't want to do that and just wants to run through it too. That's totally fine. And I'm sure that you'll be smart and great too. But I just think just from that one experience or from that program director telling me that, I felt like, I actually did gain a lot from taking some time away from medicine and taking some time away from school even, that might not be your case if you do a post-bac program or if you're kind of exclusively studying for the MCAT or whatnot, but just know that the gap year is just like, it's kind of like a life year, and if it's a double, I took 2 gap years because I was waiting for my wife to finish her master's degree. So, I just got a lot of life experience and it was great. I loved the time and it just refreshed me and had me feeling ready to tackle med school and eventually getting an MBA as well. And so, yeah, I just think it's something that you should definitely consider. And it's a good opportunity to get some life experience outside of medicine. So.
Thanks, Jordan. Krysta, any other last thoughts you wanted to add?
No, I think these guys summed it up great. I would just reiterate, there is nothing wrong with a gap year. I think a lot of people see it as, well, if I'm taking a gap year, it's because I wasn't properly prepared. But gap years are just a great chance to continue to gain experience, as Chris and Jordan both said. So big fan of the gap year. They're becoming increasingly common in applicants.
Thank you. And I think we kind of touched on this a little bit. Chris, you mentioned this, that sometimes a gap year or a post-bac program can be a way to handle a lower GPA or a lower MCAT score. But curious if there were any other takeaways that we would add or answers to this question. Krista, did you have any thoughts here?
Yeah, definitely. I know this is terrifying. GPA and MCAT are like the most terrifying words and acronyms that you could ever think about, and it still terrifies me. It's just a reality, like a normal fear response. But I think you have to think about this in the pre-med competencies where it has this sort of concentric circles. In the center, there's these GPA and MCAT. All surrounding is everything else on your application. So I want to note that it's not your entire application, but if there are lower GPA and MCAT scores, which can happen for a variety of reasons, think about upward trend. And also, if it's more than difficult to actually achieve this excellent scores, what you think of, try to compensate with the things that you're really good at. For me, I didn't necessarily have the stellar MCAT score, but what I had was an incredible research track. And I showed that on my application. The admissions committees were impressed by the amount of research. Because I said, hey, I don't really think this MCAT, but hey, here's the research part. And so capitalize the things that you're good at, which you all are at. You have something good about it on your application. And try to get in that upward trajectory. And then, of course, think about the post-bac or special master's programs to help achieve those goals.
Thanks, Chris. Krista, did you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I would agree with what Chris said. I would say something that I tell all the students that I work with is that the best and worst thing about applying to medical school is there's no one right way to do it, right? You don't have to have a certain GPA, right? You don't have to hit that number on the head. You don't have to hit that MCAT on the head. There's no specific number of hours that you're shooting for, right? Which can make it really frustrating, right? Because then you kind of open up like this space of ambiguity, but that can also be your greatest asset. So as Chris said, really lean into what your application does offer. And if there was a specific reason for maybe your GPA suffering during a certain semester, I'd recommend maybe addressing that in your application somewhere. somewhere, right? Potentially in your personal statement, that could be a great place to share a little bit, and to let them know how you've learned from it, right? To say, yes, I acknowledge that this was a challenge. Here's how I've grown from that, and here's how I would use that growth in medical school.
Awesome. Thanks, Krysta. And I also think when you're navigating these parts of med school, it is helpful to have a mentor or a coach that can provide an outside perspective. I think it is so easy to get like put your blinders on and you get very close to what you're doing. It can be very helpful to bounce these questions, bounce these ideas past someone who has a lot of experience navigating this, who can provide an outside perspective, who also has your best interests at heart. Okay, really quick, in case you joined a little bit late and you haven't seen that we are giving away a free seat to our medical school application bootcamp, just wanted to take a quick pause here and plug it for those who missed it. We are giving away a free seat to this medical school application bootcamp. It will start in March. If you're interested in entering the giveaway, you can use this bit.ly link here, and I'll kick it over to Andrew.
Hey y'all, I know some of you have been already texting and really excited to chat more with you about this boot camp. Obviously, these free webinars are fantastic to, make face with our coaches, to get to know other people in the same boat as you. But this boot camp is a great way for you to actually have a community to get you through the applications from start to finish. And a lot of the coaches you see here will be joining us for that week as well. So if you go to the next slide, a little bit more details. Obviously, we have our free,
Oh, whoa, sorry.
No worries. Well, the breakdown of the boot camp is not only are we going to have, there we go. So we have our live course outline here. Once again, it's going to take you through the whole application process, from your personal statement to your essays, workshops, and obviously nailing the interview. And once again, these are just kind of the live sessions where you'll be able to engage with other people. If you can't make the session due to, time difference, we send you all the recordings. You have access to them forever. But apart from having access to live sessions like the one we have today, you'll see that we also have additional resources in this boot camp that compiles all of Leland's, resources into kind of one full package. So if you go to the next slide, you'll be able to see that there's going to be some peer-to-peer application feedback, some interactive activities and resources. You'll be able to do some mock interviews with coaches as well, get access to coach discounts, like once again, the people we have on the panel today, and then Leland Plus, our library. So I highly, highly recommend to, register for this boot camp. You'll see the normal value of this would probably go for a couple thousand, but everyone here tonight will have the opportunity, one, to win the obviously free admission, but then everyone else will be able to get it at a discounted cost of $600 through the rest of the night. So if you have additional questions, please let us know. And yeah, I'm here to support. So you'll be getting texts or emails from me. And then if you have additional questions, we just want to make sure we can facilitate that and have you take advantage to like everything we have to offer at Leland. And obviously this is the best place to do it for medical school. So again, go to the link. I think there might be one more slide that goes over that. Yeah, go to bit.ly/win med school. I know Amanda's been dropping a ton of stuff in the chat as well. So if you have questions, let us know, but we're excited and we'll pass it back to Ellie here.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, would be super excited to have you in our med school application bootcamp. We have great coaches, and being able to learn with the group, with other folks who are in the same space as you, working on the same goals, can be a super valuable and rewarding way to prepare for this big deal. Perfect. So I want to dive back into questions. This next question, how do I approach school selection and how do I assess my competitiveness for different ranges of schools? Krysta, would love to start with you on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So the AMCAS organization, so the AAMC, the American Association of Medical Colleges, puts together a really helpful resource called the MSAR. So I think it's the Med School Admissions Requirement is what the acronym stands for. And it's a $38 resource that gives you access to the average MCAT scores and GPAs of entering classes. And so while I don't think you need to have a specific GPA or MCAT to get into any school, right, I do think it's helpful to kind of ballpark. But as you're looking through that list, I want you to remember that those are their averages, right? This is sort of that indicator of like, here's about where folks fell, but that means that folks scored above that. That means that folks scored below that. So those schools could still be on your radar, even if they feel like a little bit of a reach. I do think that that's a great place to start in terms of creating your list. I'll also have you take into consideration the schools that you really want to apply to in terms of what they value and the experiences that they offer, right? right? Med school is a long time. Jordan and Chris can both tell you that, right? You're spending a lot of hours there. You're spending a lot of money there. And so you want to make sure that it's somewhere that you're going to feel comfortable, you're going to feel at home, and is a place that really aligns with your values and goals. So take that into consideration, and then make sure that you're really thinking about the number of schools that you apply to, right? I don't think it's a secret that this application process is really time consuming. It's really financially consuming. So I typically would recommend that we try to keep it under 25 schools for your applications at the absolute most.
Awesome. Thanks, Krysta. Anything else that we wanted to add here from Jordan or Chris?
Yeah, I think I could add just one thing to this. As far as school selection goes, I think a couple things come to mind. Of course, like the location, you want to be at a place where you feel like you might have some support from either family or friends. That's important. Also, just, consider in-state versus out-of-state. I know this is kind of silly, and I'm like a little embarrassed to admit this, but like when I first applied to medical school, I wasn't as aware of kind of the in-state versus out-of-state requirements that some med schools have. And so I was applying to schools out in like West Virginia, for example. And they're like, in the secondary, they're like, well, what ties to West Virginia do you have? And I'm like, I don't even think I've stepped foot in that place before, So you just like making sure that you're aware, like, oh, like typically in-state public schools have they have a mandate to admit a certain amount of people from that state, and private schools are going to be a little different. They're going to have more opportunities to admit people from out of state and that type of thing. So just know that, and make sure that you're aware of things like that. And then I think also just to like really just hone in on what's important to you. Like I told you guys earlier, I was an engineering undergrad and went to an engineering-based medical school. I'm very passionate about like, using engineering in medicine and using using technology in medicine to improve people's lives. And so for me, like that school, my school felt like almost like not the only option. I applied broadly, of course, but like it felt like my absolute, like number one. It was important for me to get there because I felt like those people would speak my language. And so just think about what's important to you and what makes different schools unique. And is there one out there that like just lights you up, and makes it so, and obviously like it might just light you up to go to a prestigious school like Stanford or Harvard. I understand that too. But I think there's really a lot of great options out there, and there's schools that are doing some really cool things. So just be aware of that.
And I just capitalize off that last point that Jordan made. It was so beautifully said about what schools make you light up. Here are two different mission statements, Stanford and UC Riverside. Stanford is, I'll just read a sentence. To educate future physicians and foster their capacity to make discoveries and lead innovations in the science and practice of medicine. UC Riverside has the mission of UCR School of Medicine is to improve the health of the people of California, to serve inland Southern California by training a diverse workforce of physicians. Do you hear it? It should ring a bell. There's a huge difference in mission statements. It is different if you want to apply to somewhere in Massachusetts at that one school versus UC Davis. Look at the mission statement. What do they have that can help capture what you want to do in medicine? So MSAR is great because that will have the mission statements and the sort of things, the websites of the School of Medicines that you can explore. So anyway, that's last point that Jordan made beautifully.
Thank you. How should I approach the activities section? Chris, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, definitely. The activity section is either you have like way too much or way too little. The point is not quantity, it's quality. Think about those things that help, again, pull in or rein in the reasons why you want to become a doctor, a physician. So are there qualities or experiences that give you the showcase the leadership, the research, the patient interaction, the extracurricular space that you're involved in, and then really big point, when you choose your most meaningful experiences, the three top most meaningful experiences, have a letter attached to it. I know that's not always possible, but really try your best to get a letter of recommendation from those three most meaningful experiences. That's what I did because, again, they're meaningful for a reason. And you also have a letter to help bolster that meaning. And so that's something to think about, but I can pass it on to Jordan or Krysta.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can go next if that's okay, Krista. Like what Chris said, activity section is very important, and of course, the most important activities are even more important, and it's good to have letters from those sections. The insight that I would include in that is just, I sat on the admissions committee at my med school for a year, and read through these applications and read through many activity sections. And one thing that was kind of unique or interesting for me that happened during that was realizing how much weight I really did put on the activities section when I thought, you know, like when I read an application, I only had about an hour to do it. So you should be aware of that. Someone that's reading your application is going to have an hour, maybe an hour and a half, whatever it is. And they're trying to go through it quickly. And they're gonna catch on to things in your activities section, because your activities section is what kind of paints the whole picture of you, kind of gives them an idea of everything that you're doing. And so I remember as a pre-med thinking, this is kind of a dumb experience for me to put in my activity section. But I remember, when people would read my application, they would kind of like glob onto it. Let me tell you what it was briefly. You know, there was an association called the Young Entrepreneurs Association, and all I did was mentor, a high school kid for, maybe a couple of hours a week for maybe 2 or 3 months. It wasn't like a really high touch activity, and I kind of questioned whether or not it was something that would like really stand out, or what if it was really important. It was something that I thought I would do for my med school hours, but as I kind of looked at everything, I was like, I don't know if I should put this in there. I did put it in there and realized that, many people actually asked me about that later on. They're like, oh, like that sounds really cool that you mentored a local high school student and helped it, and like, what did you guys build, and what was, there was a lot of interest in this activity that I thought was just kind of like I wasn't even sure I really wanted to put it in. So just be very like generous in what activities you choose, and just know that, like, even if you feel like it's not that significant or not that important, like I think that somebody that's reviewing your application, or even an interviewer, really might latch onto it and think that that's actually really cool. So don't shortchange the experiences that you have had, and make sure that you include, obviously include what you feel like is the most important, but just know that your activities actually those are a big part of your application, and it's something that really helps people get to know who you are. So
Yeah, that's great.
I'm going to plug the competencies just one more time. I think when writing your activity section, it can be great to highlight a specific competency that you developed throughout that experience. So typically what I have folks do is, so for the AMCAS application, you're going to get about 700 characters to talk about it. The COMIS application, you're going to get about 600. And so real briefly, I want you to tell me what you did. This doesn't usually take a lot of description, because most schools are going to know what a scribe does, what a research assistant does, all of that kind of stuff. Then I want you to tell me a skill that you developed throughout that experience, right? Ideally related to one of the competencies. And then lastly, I want you to highlight, yes, how you're going to use it in medicine. So that's more of like the logistical side of things. I think everything that Chris and Jordan shared in terms of what you prioritize and how you talk about it is so, so important.
Awesome. Thank you, Krysta. On kind of a related note, in terms of telling your story, communicating who you are, curious what you think makes a stellar personal statement and how you should think about writing them. I would love to get maybe like the top tip from each of you on like what makes a stellar personal statement. I know that these are involved and it takes time to write a great one, but if you had one tip on how to make it stellar, would love to hear that.
I'm a big proponent of using story in personal statements. So picking out 2 to 3 skills or competencies you really want to share with the committee and demonstrating those through story, right? It's one thing to be able to say that you're really adaptable in a crisis situation. It's another to share a specific experience from your work as an EMT in a time where you were in the emergency room and had to take the lead on something you weren't expecting, right? So I would say take a story approach focus so that you're really able to show as opposed to tell.
Awesome. Chris, any top tip from you?
Yeah, I always say to clients, start big and then get into the nitty-gritty details way ahead of time so that you can apply, early on in the cycle. I actually did the post-it note style of developing my post. I literally wrote every single detail about my life. Maybe not too detailed, but enough of the experiences. Posted it on the wall, and I just stared at the wall for like an hour. That's probably an exaggeration, but at least I just saw it. I got to piece together, why do I want to go into medicine? And it'll come to you over a bit, and start writing down as best as you can, the storytelling. Krista said it wonderfully. Storytelling is the best way to get across why you want to go into medicine. And they should walk away from reading that saying, there's authenticity. That's drive. And they're not just telling me, they're showing me what experiences they've had growing up or professionally within school that really confirms that they do want to become a medical doctor. And the last thing is that this won't necessarily make your application, but it can break your application. So this is why there's a lot of tenderness that needs to go into this personal statement. And of course, one of the coaches here can help actually write this with you.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think there is a written portion of almost any application to any sort of grad program, and it can be hard to write about yourself. And so working with someone else who can help you refine that story and make sure it's clear can be so critical to making that process easier and arrive at a better outcome. Jordan, did you have a last thought you wanted to tack on there?
Yeah, definitely. I love what Krista and Chris have said. They're experts, and I agree with everything they said. One thing I'd add is just, a personal statement, a million times out of a million times, if you can show me something instead of telling me something, that's important. But I think, and obviously starting big and starting long is actually, thinking kind of broad spectrum as best you can is great. One thing I found shows that you've thought through this in depth, and it kind of shows a lot of care. The use of like metaphors, for example. I'll give you an example. I wrote a statement about, I came across some research that showed that, when people were walking on a sunny, there was a study that was done where they were walking on a sunny day. And when they had the sun as kind of a directional reference, they were able to walk in a straight line. But when there was, when they were walking on a cloudy day where there was no kind of sun to tell them where they were going, they thought they were walking in a straight line, but they were actually walking really tight circles, And I used that study as a metaphor in one of my personal statements to describe kind of my interest in medicine. Like, I have this like overarching interest in medicine that's like very like, I it's purpose driven. I have this idea of preventative health and longevity and keeping people healthy rather than just treating them when they're sick and those things. But then I talked about all my other interests, and how sometimes that's kind of like me, like, oh, I'm interested in engineering, I'm interested in MBA, and I'm interested in all these things. But like I was able to kind of bring together this narrative that, I have kind of this direction or purpose to what I'm doing, but there's a lot of different other avenues by which I'm doing that too. And so I don't know if that makes sense. I hope it does. I just think like when you can show an interviewer that, or when you can show somebody that you've really thought through it, or you can show that it's not just something that you're throwing down really quickly, that's helpful. And I think the use of metaphors is like a beautiful way to like tell your story, do it in a really, in a way that shows the person that's reading it that you really took your time to think through, how it came together for you. So I don't know if that's just like a tactic or if that's like the most important thing that you can do, but for me, I think that's really worked well for me. So
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. All right. I may skip past this question. We've touched on it a little bit in sense of just having letters of recommendation tied to your activities, tied to the elements that you're talking about and the other portions of your application. So might skip past this one in favor of getting kind of a high-level overview of how secondaries work. Krista, I'm curious, could you give us just a quick overview? I know there's a lot here, but if you could just give us a quick overview of what's involved in the secondaries.
Absolutely. So after you submit your primary application, schools will use that primary to make decisions about who's getting secondary applications. Typically, the most common denominator is that they'll use a specific MCAT score to do a first screening for who's going to get a secondary. Then they'll go back and do another holistic screen. So folks may get secondaries a little bit later in the process. So those secondaries are going to involve another fee from each school, which I mentioned just because I want you to be financially prepared for that. But they're also going to involve a group of essays from each of those schools. They might ask you to reflect on a time that you've had to work with somebody who's different than yourself. They might ask you, why do you want to come to this program specifically? They might talk about, how you've demonstrated a commitment to inclusion and equity in healthcare access, right? The things that are important to those programs are going to be the things that they ask about in those secondary applications. I've seen schools do as few as 1 or 2 essays all the way up to 8 to 10. They're usually short essays, no more than like a couple of paragraphs. So we're not talking pages on pages on pages. But this is where I want you to be mindful about how many schools we're applying to. I worked with an applicant one year whose family was fairly well off, had decided that, this was going to be the one cycle she was going to apply in, and that they just wanted her to apply to every school in the US. My heart almost stopped when she told me it was like 75 schools on her list. And she received secondaries from, I think, 50 or 60 of them. And so ended up spending most of her summer like Alexander Hamilton, just writing essays, right? So we don't probably want to do that. So again, this is where we really want to think about, like, how many schools do we really want to apply to? How many essays do we really want to spend our summer writing?
Awesome. Thank you, Krysta. All right. I don't think I'm the most interesting or unique applicant. How can I make myself stand out? I also think we've touched on this throughout a lot of these questions. I think this is all about, and feel free to jump in and correct me, panelists, if I'm wrong, but what I've heard relating to this question is it's about being authentic. It is about representing yourself and your story and your experiences and why that makes you a great candidate for a medical school. And I'd also add maybe a specific medical school. You understand what that medical school values. So unless there's another like quick thought there, I think I might jump ahead on this one to the next one. Awesome. All right, so we're near kind of the end of our questions. We have this question on common mistakes, and then our final question will be the last kind of wrap up final tip. So would love to have maybe like a quick overview on kind of maybe what you think the most common mistake you've seen when you've worked with clients. If there's a quick or common mistake that can be easily avoided. Would love to hear your perspectives on that. Jordan, do you want to kick us off? Oh, I think he's frozen. Maybe we'll kick over to you, Chris.
Oh, okay. So a couple things, and I'll just bullet point this. Applying too late. Yes, try to apply early, but don't rush your application. It's better to have a complete application than a rushed and early application. So, but there is a point where you're applying too late. So that's a noted. Neglecting secondaries. This is another place for your own story, your own experiences to get out in a different perspective. So this is really important. So prep, and then turn those over really quickly, or as quick as you can. And the last thing is weak letters of recommendations. I often see people, I need to get that letter of recommendation from the chair of the department, and they've never had a conversation with them. It's better to have a letter of recommendation, say from a postdoc, or from a more junior faculty, but can actually say more about your life and say more about why you actually do want to become a doctor and confirm a lot of the things that they're seeing on the application. So those are my tips.
Thanks, Chris. Krysta.
Yeah, I feel like we've covered so many good tips tonight that hopefully this will keep folks on the right track. I think at the end of the day, the most important thing and the most important mistake to avoid is telling committees what you think they want to hear. right? Med school applicant readers want to get to know you. They want to understand what your strengths are. They want to understand what you're bringing to the field and to the industry. So just remind you, right, that like your path is different than everybody else's, and that's a good thing. Don't tell them what you think they want to hear. Tell them about your experience and be authentic and be really proud of the hard work you put in.
Thank you. And maybe let's round out on this last question. What's your final tip for standing out in the medical school application process? If I know, like Krysta said, we've covered a lot of ground, and I think we've gotten a lot of great insights on how to plan, how to actually execute, and get into the schools that you're dreaming of. But if there's any just one final nugget of wisdom that you'd give our folks here, would love to hear. Jordan. Oh no, Krysta.
Yeah.
That's back, Jordan.
That's too bad. I know Jordan's had, okay, wait, maybe he's back. Jordan, go for it.
Are you guys here? Can you hear me? I'm like
Yes.
bleeping out. I apologize. At least
All
I
good.
made it this long. The last thing I'll say is just, one thing that I would really encourage, something that I would encourage everyone to look up, something I learned about in business school that I think is really helpful for this process is,
Oh shoot.
column you say stories about courage, and you think through all of the stories in your life where you feel like you've demonstrated courage. Am I still here? Can people hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would just say look up Story Matrix and have a bunch of stories on hand as you go through this process for how you've accomplished, how you've been resilient, how you've been courageous, how you've handled adversity, things like that. And I think you'll use that, of course, in your personal statement, you'll use that in your activity section, you'll use that in your interviews. You're going to have a lot of people asking you for tell me a time when you did this or whatever. And so I think that, really those that are able to tell good stories and those that are able to stories are what are going to help you connect in the mind of those that are kind of evaluating you. And I think that that's what will ultimately rule the day is, you showing that you've reflected a lot on your past and showing that you can, take good insights from what you've experienced and use that in your future career. So
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. Krysta.
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to ask for help. I think oftentimes the med school application process can feel really overwhelming and then very isolating, right? We get really in our heads about, well, I have to figure this out. I can't ask anyone else for help, especially when it comes to talking to other folks who are applying to medical school. I think that there's this sense of competition, right? And I want you to remember that more than likely, if you really want this and you're willing to dedicate yourself to it, there's a place for all of you in medical school, right? So use your resources, lean on each other, find folks that you really trust, and have them bolster you throughout your application process.
Thanks, Krysta. And Chris, you can close us out.
Yeah, I really do think I feel like I've so much to say and so many things have already been said that have been so amazing. But make sure you take some breathing room during the medical school application process. I really do think like the whole wellness aspect of this is so important because I honestly wish going back I would have had more time to just take a breath. It is so exhausting, it's long, and you want to be fresh at each new stage of the application. So you're taking care of yourself. That's just something that's going to go a long way, even into the interviews, especially. So that is my over kind of like softer tip, but still equally important.
I love it. Take care of yourself, and then you can take care of your application. Perfect. Hey, well, thanks so much for being here, everyone. So glad to have you here with us. Big thank you to our panelists, Krysta, Jordan, and Chris, for sharing their time and their insights with us. Before we close, just wanted to announce the giveaway winner to the free seat of our medical school application boot camp. That is Mariam Aremu. Congrats. We will reach out to you. And quick reminder that if you unfortunately did not win the giveaway, as there could only be one, there is that exclusive discount that you have access to from being here on our event tonight. And one last quick round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much for being here. If you're interested in working with any of these coaches, feel free to check out their profiles on the Leland platform. You can scan those QR codes to see those. And thanks so much. Looking forward to seeing you all for the next couple sessions of Med School Week. Thank you all.